Increased scrutiny now on H1B visas. According to a report, a conversation that a Justice Department official had with the media outlet InfoWars, the DOJ is now going to investigate a certain alleged misuse or abuse of H1B visas. The allegation that various companies, IT companies for example, using those H1B visas and allegedly prioritizing foreign nationals instead of Americans. And also, we're hearing this week that the Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick also saying that an overhaul of H1B and Green Cards, the entire process, could come sooner rather than later. Let's take a closer look at this story. We're joined by our guest immigration attorney, Hiba Anver. She joins us from Arlington, Virginia. Hiba, we've heard about these rumblings of the government not being happy with these hiring practices as far as H1B visas go. We heard Howard Lutnick's comments as well. What exactly is this DOJ probe going to look at?
So to be quite honest with you, I don't think that this DOJ probe is necessarily anything new. Government agencies have historically investigated, employer hiring practices and have also focused on the H-1B visa. And I think that for folks who are familiar with the H-1B visa process, we know that there are certain guardrails and steps that are put in place to ensure that the program is not abused on a large scale basis. And so I think that they will, based on what they're purporting, take a look at whether or not the H-1B visa is being used in any sort of a discriminatory way. But I think most folks who are familiar with the process and who handle H-1B visas will tell you that the vast majority of the time, the H-1B visa and the overall program is not used in a discriminatory way and is not misused for discriminatory hiring practices.
Right. But the rhetoric really, Hiba, is getting stronger by the day. We also heard Florida Governor Ron DeSantis calling it a scam. So things are, in a way, getting serious here. So are you expecting, though, this overhaul, really, of how H-1Bs are going to be handed out? And what are those changes that we might see?
So what I believe Commerce Secretary Lutnick is referring to is a new proposed rule. It's not final, but it's proposed. And what it seeks to do is revamp the way the H-1B lottery system is conducted in a way that gives individual applicants that are earning higher salaries a higher chance at actually being selected in the lottery. I do think that there is a bit of a divide in terms of whether or not this rule is actually going to be passed. Proponents of the rule are obviously going to argue that the rule makes it to where the top earners and the most highly skilled are actually being selected for the lottery. And critics of the rule are saying that this is almost entirely excluding the best and the brightest recent graduates who would otherwise be participating in the H-1B lottery from having a fair shot at being selected. And so, where I think that this debate really heats up is whether or not one views the ability of the United States to attract the best and brightest talent from around the world as a benefit to the U.S. economy, to U.S. companies, to U.S. academic institutions. And so I think that, this is actually going to be an issue that we're going to be watching very closely because this would really change the face of how the H-1B lottery is conducted. And I think that there is a lot of growing concern for folks who are not necessarily being underpaid, but who are being paid on a slightly lower end of an overall salary range because they're recent graduates and what that does to their chances of being selected in the lottery.
Mm-hmm. Hiba, stay with us. We're trying to get your reaction on this next story as well. We saw developments here this week as far as the Trump administration mulling perhaps changes to limitations of stay being put on student visas, looking at a 4-year term here instead of continuous renewals and an unlimited stay, perhaps also looking at changes as far as visa rules go on journalist visas, looking at restrictions as little as 240 days and just 90 days for Chinese nationals. Now, Hiba, how is this 4-year limit going to really work for students as far as this new proposal goes? We know that there's going to be a 30-day period for public consultation to people to give comments. But really, if a student is doing a PhD, for example, he's going to or she's going to have to be here for more than 4 years, maybe even 6.
Yeah, I think the concern here is that assuming that this rule actually becomes a final rule, then what this does is it imposes additional limitations on foreign students and adds additional restrictions by eliminating the ability for the foreign student to remain for the duration of their program and in exchange, limiting them to a fixed 4-year period. But it's important to take a look at this in terms of everything else that's been happening, as opposed to just looking at this in a vacuum. There has been a lot of change and a lot of policy and a lot of rhetoric as it applies to foreign students. And my concern here is that just by the fact that this rule is being proposed, even if it doesn't go through, this is just going to be another reason for foreign students to think twice before selecting the United States as the location where they want to pursue their studies. And foreign students are a core component to the success of US academic institutions. So I think that this is all just kind of painting a larger picture of the United States being less welcoming of a place to foreign students. And then we kind of have to think about what this looks like in terms of the trickle-down effects for companies, because university recruiting is a core component
Right.
of the talent pool that a lot of these companies hire from, right? And so anything that's going to either add restrictions and limitations or anything that's going to be perceived as another unfriendly policy, I think at this point is problematic.
Indeed. Hiba Anver, we will leave it there for now. Thanks very much for your insight. Hiba Anver, immigration attorney, joining us here on Washington Watch.